people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Former WBO super flyweight champion Mio Yoshida of Japan posted this via her Instagram account. It reads, "The biggest Christmas gift of the year, I was able to sign with Lou Dibella. Lou, Sean, everyone at Dibella Entertainment, thank you. From now on, I want to show you a lot of hot games this year, inquiries about the game, Dibella Entertainment." It appears that former two-time WBO super flyweight champion Mio Yoshida has some interest in partnering up with a promotional outfit in the West, and she's just done that. You have to assume, based on this, that it's Mio's intention to perhaps fight in the West, presumably in the United States, as primarily she's fought in the land of the rising sun. She's been fighting in her native Japan. I believe that at this point in her career, she would like to fight abroad. It's an interesting pairing, to say the least. Mio Yoshida reigned as WBO champion for some time, but she lost the WBO title to Tamao Ozawa, who then lost it to Mizuki Hiruta. I don't know that it's Mio's intention to challenge Mizuki Hiruta for the WBO title she used to hold. I don't even know that Mio intends to continue campaigning as a super flyweight. Just north of super flyweight, there's a more vibrant division that's getting more attention in the women's bantamweight division. Though at the same time, if she could get a world title shot, a world title opportunity at Mizuki Hiruta, her WBO title, well, now would be the best time to do it, because Mizuki Hiruta only has 4 professional contests, 4 professional bouts. In spite of being a newly crowned champion, she is green. A lot greener than the girls you'll find up there at 118 pounds. As far as the world champions go, anywhere in between super flyweight and bantamweight, Mizuki Hiruta is arguably the greenest champion. Greener than the other 3 champions at super flyweight, greener even than the champions up there at bantamweight. So it all depends on what Mio Yoshida wants to do. Does she want to continue campaigning as a super flyweight, or would she prefer to move up in weight, up to bantamweight, a division that's buzzing a bit more than the women's super flyweight division? Mio Yoshida is 34 years old after all, and perhaps it's not as easy as it used to be to get down to 115 pounds, 118 pounds for a 34-year-old fighter might be a little bit easier to do. At the same time, there's virtue in campaigning at bantamweight as opposed to super flyweight, because the bantamweight division, bantamweight gets more coverage than super flyweight does. There are 4 separate champions at super flyweight and 4 separate champions at bantamweight, but the ones at bantamweight fight on major platforms. At least 2 of them do. Ebony Bridges by way of the IBF and Nina Hughes by way of the WBA. WBC champion Yulihan Luna of Mexico is with Promociones del Pueblo, south of the border. Her fights are featured on ESPN Knockout south of the border, ESPN Plus on this side of things. Perhaps it's Mio Yoshida's intention to campaign as a bantamweight moving forward. Mio Yoshida, who sports a professional record of 15 wins, 3 losses, no draws, and no recorded knockouts. She's looking for a change in decorum, rubbing elbows with the likes of Amandia Serrano, one of the biggest names in the sport right now. Inking a promotional pact with American-based promoter Lou Dibella, well-known fixture in the sport. If nothing else, you can see she's looking for a change. Having last seen action in May of this year, that was the Tamao Ozawa fight where Mio Yoshida lost a split decision. It was the only fight that she had this year. Mio Yoshida has been fighting once a year for the last 3 years. She only fought once in 2020, only fought once last year, and she only fought once this year. 34 years old, she's not too old to hit the ground running and make some waves next year, but she needs to do it in a jiffy. She needs to hit the ground running. She needs to be busier. She ain't the oldest fighter, but she ain't the youngest either, and time is of the essence. It's going to be interesting to see what fruit this partnership bears in the coming year. In men's lightweight news, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now, per Broward County Sheriff's Office online records, Gervonta Davis last night was arrested and is in jail charged with battery caused bodily harm.
Domestic violence.
Another domestic violence case.
Another one.
Gervonta Davis already had 2 court cases pending, one of which was in reference to the vehicular accident he had. This makes 3.
He's scheduled to fight Hector Luis Garcia on January 7th, Showtime pay-per-view.
Veteran boxing scribe Gail Lynn Falkenthal stated, if Showtime Boxing canceled a bout for Rolly Romero due to an allegation prior to an investigation, they surely will cancel this fight due to the arrest of Gervonta Davis. What a cluster fuck.
It is true that before Rolly Romero even got the chance to clear his name, just based on the accusations, just based on the allegations, he was pulled from the Gervonta Davis fight. Isaac Cruz ended up standing in his place.
For anyone saying that Gervonta Davis is in fact innocent until proven guilty, that didn't stop Rolly Romero from being pulled from that fight. That didn't stop Showtime from finding a replacement for him based on the egregiousness of the allegations, which were just allegations. He did go on to clear his name, but it did have some effect on his schedule. Could it have an effect on Gervonta?
It should. He's a piece of shit.
I don't like him.
But Ellie Seckbach does. Ellie Seckbach, who posted this to his Instagram account, which reads, reminder to all, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. There are a few details. We all know Tank was arrested today in Florida. I'm sure this will fizzle out to no case, as happens with many star athletes.
It's not a secret that Ellie Seckbach achieves access to many fighters, Gervonta Davis among them, by stroking their egos. He's boxing's resident mascot for a select few, and no matter what they do, no matter what they're involved in,
He's not a journalist. He's a professional brown-noser.
not really a boxing scribe of any kind when you really think about it.
This isn't Gervonta Davis's first run-in with the law. Far from it. It's not the first. Likely won't be the last. And this isn't even his first domestic violence case.
At this point, this is pattern behavior from the Baltimore native. Pattern behavior that Ellie Seckbach seems almost complicit.
Oh, he's okay with it because Gervonta Davis gives him interviews.
Lets him hang around the gym, ask people stupid questions, point his camera everywhere.
Making the assertion that Gervonta Davis is innocent until proven guilty.
Though this being pattern behavior and this not being Gervonta Davis's first domestic violence incident, who out there really believes that he's innocent at this point?
Not that Gervonta Davis's guilt should be assigned on the premise of belief, but what are you, his lawyer?
In so many words, what you're doing is asserting his innocence. And on what premise? For what reason are you doing that? Because he lets you hang around the gym?
You're not his public defender.
You're not his lawyer, and you're not his publicist. You don't need to run spin for this guy because he got himself in trouble again.
This entire situation harkens back to an exchange that he had with Ryan Garcia earlier this year in June.
When Gervonta Davis said $200,000, he needs that money back from him buying that Ferrari. Stop trying to keep up, broke boy. To which Ryan Garcia replied, yeah, I get endorsement deals outside of boxing. Something you don't know about because you hit women.
As stated, this is not Gervonta Davis's first run-in with the law, far from it, and this isn't even his first domestic violence incident.
Reflects poorly on any athlete, any public figure, to consistently be involved in these kinds of incidents, these kinds of domestic violence situations, because you're intended to be, ideally, a role model for the younger members of your community. And
whether Gervonta Davis, the fighter, is aware of it or not, that's what his handlers, that's how they hope to market him.
Promote him as the poor kid from Baltimore who made it to the big time.
Why don't you stop hitting girls, you little butterball?
Poor kid from Baltimore who can't keep his hands to himself.
Let's put the violins away for a second, because Gervonta Davis being a poor kid from Baltimore, you know, there's a lot of poor kids in Baltimore. There's a lot of poor kids all around the country. That don't give him a pass.
It's not a green light for you to run around smashing cars into people and smacking up broads.
This kid's a piece of shit. I don't like him.
I never did, and I still don't. Though the relevant question here is, will this affect his proposed fight with Hector Luis Garcia in early January? There's a chance that it does. There's a chance that it doesn't. Though if it does,
that fight's a little over 2 weeks away. Just 2 weeks.
If the fight were to be called off as a result of this latest legal kerfuddle involving Gervonta Davis, well, that would in effect wipe out Showtime's entire schedule for the first quarter. We know that Charlo versus Zoo has been called off as a result of an injury Jermell Charlo is reported to have sustained.
That was supposed to go down in January, so is this fight.
If the fight were to get called off, that makes 2 fights not happening that were supposed to happen in January. And don't forget that Errol Spence Jr.'s fight, presumably opposite the ring Keith Thurman, that got pushed back.
Errol Spence got in a car accident. Now he's talking about he ain't going to come back till either May or June.
May or June is, in effect, the second quarter of next year. What the hell Showtime got going on in the first? Presumably the Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez fight that has not been officially announced. There is no official fight date, location.
Should we expect an unexpected injury, some sort of snafu that pushes that fight later out in the year? That seems to be what's going on over there at Showtime.
Whether it's just a run of bad luck or more to the situation, these situations then meets the eye. It appears that Showtime's first quarter is so affected. Many fights that people were expecting.
You know, maybe that butterball should just keep his hands to himself.
Maybe he should stop hitting girls. That's an idea.
Just putting that out there.
It's hard to market a fighter and make him appealing to the masses when he has several run-ins with the law, just like this one, that make him an almost irreprehensible character.
Didn't he threaten to shoot some girl in the face?
With at least 2 domestic violence incidents, a vehicular accident to where, reportedly, he left a pregnant woman.
She says he looked right at her and left her right where she was after the accident to flee the scene.
It's hard to sell a guy like this because this guy's a piece of shit.
Brian hit the nail on the head. Irrespective of how you might feel about Gervonta Davis's domestic violence cases and all the legal woes that he has, this makes him an unattractive ambassador for potential sponsorships and corporate endorsements.
Corporate sponsorships, they don't want a scumbag like this representing them.
Or their brand.
That, in effect, puts a ceiling, a cap on just how appealing Gervonta Davis is and how far he can really go.
His matchmaking isn't really all that great. He as an individual, he as an ambassador for the sport, he's not much of an ambassador.
He's a piece of shit. And he's gonna keep being a piece of shit.
Was a piece of shit yesterday, he's a piece of shit today.
Somebody's gotta say it, so I'm gonna say it.
Was a piece of shit yesterday, he's a piece of shit today.
And that's the way it is. And finally, just in keeping with the theme of woeful news over there at Showtime and the PBC, the WBO issues medical certification letter to Jermell Charlo requiring explanation of injury and recovery.
It's tantamount to a show cause letter.
That's basically what it is. Mr. Charlo is hereby ordered to submit, within the next 5 days upon issuance of this notice, a detailed medical explanation of his injury, findings, recovery, prognosis, and his orthopedic specialist's opinion as to when he will be physically and medically cleared to compete and return to active competition. WBO Championships Committee Chairman Luis Batista Salas stated, event promoter TGB Promotions. Tom Brown via official letter, a copy of which was obtained by BoxingScene.com. Charlo will have until January 1st to provide proof. Through a modest extension to the next business day is likely given the date falls on a weekend, Sunday, and holiday, New Year's Day. Ironically, the letter was submitted less than 24 hours after Houston's Charlo took to social media to, in fact, provide proof of injury.
He posted a picture of himself wearing a cast on his hand.
That's not really proof of an injury or that you even saw a doctor. The undisputed champion posted a picture showing a short arm cast wrapped around his left hand, wrist, and forearm, accompanied by a medical report from Houston Methodist Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. The letter was dated December 23rd, 3 days after injuring his hand during a midweek sparring session. Jermell Charlo was seen in my clinic December 23rd, 2022, noted Dr. Vincent Chopin. He has sustained a left scaphoid fracture and 5th metacarpal base fracture. He will be placed in a short arm cast at this time. It is my recommendation.
Jermell Charlo posting a picture of his arm in a cast on social media. That's not really proof of an injury, but Dr. Vincent Chopin's commentary and recommendation.
Does that not meet the desired requisites the WBO is looking for?
It is my recommendation that Jermell should refrain from upper extremity training that involves impact for 2 months.
Charlo was due to make his first defense of his undisputed crown and third defense of at least one belt in his second title reign since regaining the WBC title 3 years ago. He inherited Australia's zoo as a mandatory challenger after he scored a 10th round knockout of Argentina's Brian Castaño in their May 14th rematch to fully unify the junior middleweight division.
What's not being said is he already adopted another mandatory challenger 2 years ago.
In 2020, when he unified titles with then unified champion Jason Rosario, and he won the red belt from Jason, that red belt came with a mandatory challenger attached, a mandatory that was outstanding then and is still outstanding now. Bakram Murtazaliev, who has been the IBF's mandatory challenger since 2019.
He was mandatory before Tim.
By way of the IBF, and more specifically, he's been in line to take on Jermell Charlo longer than Tim has.
Oddly enough, you don't see the IBF putting the squeeze on Jermell Charlo the same way that the WBO are.
Jermell Charlo has fought at least 2 times since becoming IBF champion. The first Brian Castaño fight and the second.
The fight with Tim Tszyu next month would have been the third.
But as I've said in many videos, you don't see the IBF pressuring Jermell to take on mandatory challengers the way they pressured Josh Taylor, the way they pressured Joe Cordina. So soon after winning the red belt, he was injured, and they immediately stripped him.
It wasn't right.
I got nothing against Jermell Charlo. I like the guy. I like his undisputed run. But it really does seem like the IBF doesn't keep the same energy for PBC fighters that they keep for other fighters and other IBF champions.
They're not putting a squeeze on Jermell, but the WBO is.
Failure to comply with this order will result in Mr. Charlo waiving all rights hereunder and with the committee proceeding per WBO regulations of World Championship contests, stated Batista Salas.
You know what the problem is? They want an ETA.
They want to know when this guy's going to come back because he's only fought once this year. And he's WBO champion. They want to move their ranks along, keep their title in circulation, and they can't do that if he's hampered by an injury. They're not going to allow him all the time in the world to sit on their title.
The fight with Brian Castaño, the rematch earlier this year, was in May.
The WBO are likely telling themselves that we're not going to allow Jermell Charlo to sit on this belt for a year or close to it. He's already in possession of all the other alphabet titles at this weight. And if he's out for an extended amount of time, none of those belts are in circulation. Nobody gets to fight for them.
I don't think Jermell's coming back to the junior middleweight division. I've said that before.
Tim Tszyu is likely to take a interim fight in the in-between time while Jermell recuperates.
Are we to assume that when he's done recuperating, his first fight back, his very first fight back, will be the Tim Tszyu fight without a tune-up fight to shake off the cobwebs?
Coming right off an injury, that doesn't sound realistic. That's just not the way things are done.
That's going to be his first fight back. I don't think so.
With the proliferation of other mandatory challengers by way of other alphabet organizations, Sebastian Fundora by way of the WBC,
Bakram Murtazaliev by way of the IBF,
I'm just not convinced that Jermell is coming back.